They say every relationship is different, and that's true. But what no one prepares you for is how silence feels after it ends. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't the breakup itself. It's the aftershock, the emptiness, the unanswered questions. It's waking up to a quiet that once held someone's love and now holds only space. If you're in no contact right now and it feels like you're drowning in it, this isn't about waiting for a message. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs one. This video isn't just advice, it's a mirror. And what you'll see might not be easy, but it just might be exactly what you need. So stay with me, like the video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and let's dive in. Part 1. Why no contact feels so hard at first. When the person you love looks you in the eye and says, "I don't want this anymore," it doesn't land as a sentence. It hits like an earthquake. Your body reacts before your mind catches up. Your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. Your world goes quiet, and yet your heart pounds like a drum. Because your brain doesn't interpret this as just a breakup. It interprets it as danger, as abandonment, as rejection on the most primal level. One day she's beside you, laughing, texting you goodnight. The next, nothing. Not a call, not a message, not even a hint of closure. Just silence. It doesn't compute. You start combing through every interaction, replaying conversations in your head, searching for the moment it all cracked. But the truth is, you were blindsided because you weren't the one writing the ending. She was, quietly, long before she spoke it. And when it finally hits, it doesn't just hurt. It consumes. You can't eat. Food has no taste. You can't sleep. Your mind won't stop spinning. You wake up at 3 a.m. sweating, reaching for a phone that hasn't buzzed in days. You feel like your entire body is grieving, not just your heart. It's not just sadness, it's shock, withdrawal, like something vital was ripped out of you. And so, like most men, you react, you beg, you plead, you apologize for things you don't even understand. You send paragraphs trying to explain. You drive across town just to see her face. You write the letter you swore you'd never write. Because when something breaks that deeply, all you want is to fix it, to make her see, to make her remember. You throw everything at the wall, hoping something might stick and bring her back. But it never works. Not because your feelings aren't real, not because your love wasn't sincere, but because she's already gone somewhere emotionally that you haven't reached yet. She's been preparing for this ending, building emotional distance brick by brick. By the time she said the words out loud, the wall between you was already standing. High, cold, final. And here's the hardest part to swallow. The more you push, the higher that wall gets. Every text, every voicemail, every desperate gesture doesn't soften her heart. It confirms her decision. It tells her she made the right call, that you're not grounded, that you're reacting, not evolving. And that's what turns love into pressure, what turns space into suffocation. This is why no contact feels so impossible in the beginning, because silence feels like giving up, like letting go of your only chance. It feels like you're losing her all over again every day you don't reach out. But here's the truth you don't want to hear yet, but need to. Your silence isn't surrender. It's the only form of strength she can actually feel from you right now. It's not passive, it's powerful. You think you're the only one hurting, that she's moved on while you're breaking apart. But detachment isn't evidence of peace, it's just a different stage of pain. You're bleeding in the open, she's bleeding behind walls, and nothing you do or say will break through until she's ready to feel what you're feeling. So you let the silence grow, not because you don't love her, but because you finally understand that love without self-respect becomes self-destruction. And if she ever circles back, let it be to a man who chose dignity over desperation. Let it be to a man who walked through fire without chasing the flame that left him. No contact isn't a tactic, It's the beginning of healing. And yes, it hurts like hell at first, but the fire that burns you now is the same fire that will forge you later. Part 2. The psychology of the breakup. Most breakups don't erupt in a moment of passion. They unfold in silence. They begin not with shouting matches or slammed doors, but with a subtle shift in energy, a lingering hesitation, a quiet pulling away that often goes unnoticed. By the time she says, "I can't do this anymore," the decision has already lived in her mind for weeks, maybe months. You just weren't part of the conversation, and that's what makes it so painful. While you were still investing, still believing in the connection, still imagining a future, she was slowly detaching, internally rewriting the story she once wanted to live with you. She thought about it during drives home. She questioned it during late-night silences. She replayed the hard moments and asked herself if they were worth enduring. So when she finally speaks those words, there's no tremble in her voice. There's no hesitation. Just clarity and a terrifying kind of calm. That calm hits you like a punch to the chest. It feels heartless, cold, unrecognizable. You start questioning everything. Was any of it real? How can someone who once held your face with love now look through you like a stranger? But here's the hard truth most men miss. The coldness isn't proof she didn't love you. It's the armor she had to build to carry out the decision. She's not emotionless, she's emotionally armored. Because if she lets herself feel too deeply in that moment, she might hesitate, she might question, she might fold, and she doesn't want to fold, so she hardens. And it's in that hardening that we often get crushed. We interpret it as cruelty, as a lack of empathy, as betrayal. But what you're really witnessing is a kind of survival mechanism. She's bracing against your pain, because if she allows herself to absorb it, it will mirror her own, and she's not ready to feel that yet. This is why trying to convince her right after the breakup rarely works. You think your words might wake something up in her, spark a change of heart, make her realize what she's walking away from. But all she hears is emotion, all she sees is pressure, and when someone has finally reached the emotional threshold to walk away, pressure only validates their exit. It's important to understand that the psychology of the one who leaves isn't built on malice. It's built on mental rehearsal. She's had time to make peace with the guilt, to numb the fear, to rewrite the narrative in a way that helps her walk without crumbling. That's why she seems so sure, so unaffected. But that certainty is rarely permanent. It's just the surface story she's using to cross the emotional bridge. And the irony is, her emotional distance often isn't strength. It's fear disguised as control. She's afraid that if she allows space for empathy, she'll lose momentum. She's afraid that if she opens the door to your pain, she'll have to face her own. So she shuts it all down. You can't fix that. You can't force your way back in. And the more you try, the more she clings to that emotional armor, convincing herself she made the right choice, even if part of her isn't fully sure. That's why silence is so necessary, because it doesn't argue, it doesn't beg, it doesn't remind. It simply allows space for reality to settle, for regret to surface, and for the emotional mask to start cracking under the weight of what's been lost. So when she walks away cold, don't assume she stopped feeling. Assume she started protecting, not just from you, but from the part of herself that still might care more than she wants to admit. And the longer you let that space breathe, the more likely she'll have to face the one thing her logic tried to bury, her heart. Part 3. Why time is the most powerful factor. No contact isn't a shortcut, it isn't a trick, and it definitely isn't magic. It's not about disappearing for a few days and waiting for her to suddenly feel lost without you. You can't force clarity, just like you can't rush grief. You can't speed bake insight like a cake and expect it to be ready in 30 days. Time doesn't work that way. Healing doesn't work that way. And regret, true, honest, unsettling regret, never shows up on demand. That's why time matters more than anything else in this process. Because in the beginning, silence just feels like absence, and absence at first feels like freedom to the person who left. The weight of the relationship lifts, the noise fades. There's relief, there's space, there's that brief and deceptive sense of peace. But here's the truth behind that peace. It's shallow. It floats above unprocessed emotion. It's a pause, not a conclusion. Because while she may feel relieved at first, time has a way of digging deeper. At first, she tells herself she made the right decision. She rewrites the story to ease the guilt. She might say, "We grew apart," or "It just wasn't working anymore." And for a while she believes it. But time doesn't just pass. It reveals. And as the weeks roll by in silence, things begin to shift. The world doesn't feel as bright. The distractions don't work as well. That new person she might be entertaining, suddenly they don't say the right things. They don't understand her in the same way. They don't bring the safety or the depth she once had with you. Comparison creeps in, quietly, then relentlessly. She starts to remember things you said. How you looked at her when you were proud. The way you used to listen when she spoke about the little things. The way your presence made her nervous system feel safe. Something rare, something valuable, something not easily replaced. The memories stop being blurry. They come back in sharp detail, not just the highlight reel, but the soul of what you shared. The kind of love that didn't just show up for the good days, but endured through the hard ones. And then, one day it hits her, not through some grand event, not through some emotional crisis, but in the quiet of her own thoughts. He really hasn't called. He really walked away. It's in that moment she realizes that your silence wasn't a strategy. It was strength. It wasn't bitterness. It was boundaries. You didn't disappear to make her chase you. You disappeared because chasing her would have meant abandoning yourself. That's when time begins to do what no speech, no message, no handwritten letter could ever achieve. It starts to sink in that she didn't just lose your attention, she may have lost your presence entirely. And not because you slammed the door, but because you never begged for it to stay open. Time creates space. Space creates reflection. And reflection is what leads to either reconciliation or true closure. But either way, it's real, not forced, not rushed, and never manipulated. So when you're tempted to break the silence too soon, remind yourself of this. If she's going to feel the weight of losing you, she needs time to carry it without interference. She needs time for her story to fall apart on its own. Because only then will she realize that the peace she felt at first was never peace at all. It was just the quiet before the ache began. Let time do what it was made for. Let silence speak where your words no longer can. Because the longer she sits with your absence, the louder your value becomes. And if she truly loved you, even just once, there will come a moment when she looks around and nothing else feels quite the same. And in that moment, it won't be what you said that changes her mind. Part 4. What happens to them? During no contact, they may look unbothered, laugh on social media, go out, flirt, post pictures with someone new. And for a while, you might believe it, that maybe they've truly moved on, that your absence doesn't touch them at all. But appearances are rarely truth, because just like you, they're not immune to attachment. They're not exempt from the quiet echo of something once deeply familiar. At first, it seems like freedom, a breath of fresh air, no texts to answer, no expectations to manage. But freedom without depth is just distraction, and distraction has a short shelf life. Over time, silence strips away the surface, and when the noise dies down, memories start creeping in. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, like a song playing in a coffee shop you both used to visit, like a scent, a photo, a phrase that reminds them of how safe it felt being loved by you. Because safety isn't easy to replace, not in a hookup, not in a rebound, not in filtered posts or flirty replies. Emotional intimacy leaves fingerprints on the mind, on the body, and especially on the nervous system. And while they may seem fine on the outside, the inside eventually catches up. Then comes the subtle shift. The emotional radar pings, not with a grand confession, not with, "I miss you." That would make them too vulnerable. Instead, it shows up disguised as something simple. "Hey, do you have my charger? How's your cat doing? I saw something that reminded me of you." It sounds like logistics, but it's not. It's a test, a probe, a quiet attempt to see if the door is still cracked open. Because now they're starting to feel it, not just the absence of you, but the absence of how they felt when they were with you. The way they didn't have to explain themselves, the way they felt seen without judgment, the way your love offered safety without needing to be earned every day. And whether they admit it or not, that kind of love leaves a silence louder than words. So when they reach out, it won't always be obvious. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the undertone. It's not about the charger, it's not about the cat, it's about regret cloaked in casual. It's about trying to touch a part of the past without fully stepping into the present. It's the beginning of realization, slow, quiet, uncertain, that maybe they didn't just leave a relationship, maybe they lost something real. And that realization, it never happens in noise. It only arrives when everything else stops. Let them feel it. Part 5. Why contacting them resets the process. The moment you reach out, even with something small, even with something that sounds harmless, you interrupt something far more powerful than you realize. Because every time you check in, every time you break the silence just to see how they're doing, you're not just reconnecting, you're releasing them from discomfort, from doubt, from the weight of their own choice. You're giving them emotional relief. They no longer have to wonder if you're still there. They no longer have to sit with the silence and question whether they really lost you. Your message, no matter how casual or well-intentioned, becomes their answer. And that answer gives them control again. It soothes the ache they were just beginning to feel. It softens the edges of regret before it has a chance to cut deep. And suddenly, they don't have to face the full truth of walking away because you just showed them they still matter without having to do anything at all. You're stopping the process of regret. When you send that text, maybe something nostalgic, something playful, something that says, "Hey, remember this," what you're really doing is trying to spark something in them. You want them to feel what you're feeling. You want them to miss you. You want to jog their memory, hoping it brings their heart back to where it once was. But here's the truth. One message, no matter how clever or sweet, won't undo a decision they convinced themselves was right. It won't make them see your value. It won't make them regret the breakup. If anything, it relieves them of the need to look inward. It makes them feel desirable again. It feeds their ego, not their heart. And it resets the emotional distance they were slowly beginning to feel. The silence that was once echoing in their mind suddenly becomes just a pause in the conversation, something they can return to whenever they feel curious, lonely, or bored. What you thought would spark reconnection often just reinforces disinterest, because real regret doesn't come when you remind them how great you were. It comes when they begin to realize that your presence wasn't guaranteed, that you didn't just disappear, you withdrew access, that your silence wasn't passive, it was powerful, that you didn't chase closure because you became it. Let them sit with that, not out of revenge, not to manipulate, but because that's the only way it becomes real for them. You don't need to punish them. Life will do that on its own. All you need to do is step out of the way and remove the option of access. When they can no longer reach out and expect a response, when they realize they're no longer entitled to your energy, something shifts. The story they told themselves about being better off, about moving on, about how you'd always be around, begins to collapse under its own weight. Don't tell them you're doing no contact. Don't announce your silence. Let them feel it. Because silence is only powerful when it's felt, not explained. When you stop speaking, they're forced to listen, to the absence, to the memories, to the parts of themselves they were trying to outrun. And over time, that space begins to do what no well-crafted text ever could. It stirs the emotions they buried. It brings the past into sharper focus. It confronts them with the truth, that you were never the one who needed convincing. They were. So don't reset the process. Don't break the silence for the illusion of progress. Because if they're meant to come back, they will. But not because you reminded them, because they remembered on their own. And if they don't, then at least you'll know that what you built was real and that your silence wasn't wasted. It was self-respect in its purest form. Part 6. What you must focus on instead. No contact was never meant to be a waiting game. It's not about counting the days in silence, hoping they'll miss you. It's about using that silence as a forge, where you rebuild everything they once took for granted. You don't just sit in stillness. You grow in it. You redirect your energy inward, not to prove something to them, but to reclaim what you lost in trying to hold on. This is your time to restore discipline, to set a routine that doesn't revolve around someone else's mood, to show up for yourself daily, through movement, through structure, through choices that build you into the man you always intended to be. You strengthen your body not just to look better, but to feel grounded in it. You sharpen your mind not to become impressive, but to become unshakable. You rebuild your emotional strength by learning to face the ache without trying to numb it with distractions or desperate reconnections. And when they do reach out, because if the connection was ever real, they eventually will, you won't be the same man who was left. You won't respond with need, with hope, or with emotional fragility. You'll respond, if at all, from a place of calm, from a man who didn't just survive the loss, but became more whole because of it. That's what changes everything. You become the version of yourself they never expected to emerge from the silence. The one they can't quite read anymore. The one who no longer needs their validation because he's already chosen his own peace. That's what haunts them. Not your absence, but your evolution. Let them wonder how you moved on without making noise. Let them question whether they ever truly understood you. Let them sit with the discomfort of realizing that the man who once reached out no longer has a reason to. Because you didn't just do no contact, you became someone unforgettable in the process. So, here's the quiet truth most never want to admit. Time exposes everything. There is no countdown, no guaranteed day when they suddenly realize what they lost. No universal 30-day rule that flips a switch in their heart. Time doesn't obey formulas, and healing doesn't follow a script. Some exes come back after 3 weeks, some after 3 months, some never do. And that's the truth most people don't want to hear, because it removes the illusion of control. But here's what time always does. It reveals. It strips away the noise, the ego, the denial. It peels back the stories people tell themselves to feel okay about walking away. It tests what was real and what was only temporary comfort. And in that stillness, the truth begins to surface. About them, about you, about the relationship you both created and abandoned in different ways. And while you wait for nothing and prepare for everything, something powerful happens. You grow, not to win them back, but to come back to yourself. You stop chasing closure and start becoming it. You stop needing validation and begin standing in your own presence. Because the point was never to make them regret leaving. The point was to become someone who never had to beg to be kept. That's the quiet victory no one sees. Not in their return, but in your return to self. And when you stay silent, when you grow with intention, when you hold your dignity like something sacred, you win. Every single time. Because even if they never come back, you did. And that's the only comeback that ever really mattered. If this message gave you something real, clarity, stillness, or just the strength to keep going, don't rush past it. Let it breathe. Let it settle into you. Let it shape who you're becoming. If it spoke to your soul, like the video, subscribe to stoicstation.com and keep becoming the kind of man who no longer waits to be chosen, because he's already chosen himself.